Welcome to the Light Gate, where reality bends and the unseen awakens. Preston Dennett, joined by Dolly Saffron, guiding you beyond the veil and into the infinite unknown. Every week, we unlock high strangeness, extraterrestrial contact, hidden realms, psychic awakenings, the afterlife, and secrets they don't want you to know. Step through the gate, and if you feel the calling, subscribe to the channel and share it with those ready to awaken.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of The Light Gate. This is the last Monday in February. We're heading for March. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We're on Facebook, we're on Roku, we're on Rumble, and we're on YouTube. We have a really great show for you today. I would like to thank Carnation, our sponsor. They've been with us for quite a while now, almost 8-9 months, and we love you very much. I would like to do a quick shout out for Michael Kennedy, who is one of our chat buddies, who is now beginning to podcast. And I want you all to look him up at Foggy Notions Podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe. He is fantastic. We love him very much, and we wish him all the best. Preston, go.
All right. There's the Foggy Notions podcast right there on the screen. So if you can see that, just type that in, and it'll take you right there. All right. Very exciting news. Thank you guys for joining us for episode 147 of The Light Gate. I'm your host, Preston Dennett, and my lovely co-host is, of course, Dolly Saffron. We're very excited about our show tonight. We have two guests. Michael Schratt is a returning guest, and we have a brand new guest, Peter Merlin, who's a real honest-to-God expert on Area 51. So we're going to get right to that. I am going to say a very quick hello to you folks in chat, but very quick, because we really do want to get right directly to the show. But we do have quite a crowd here, so it's very nice to see all of you. I'm not going to name all you guys because you know who you are. Do want to give a shout out to Namaste. We absolutely adore you and thank you for your amazing and continuing support. But yeah, plenty of very familiar names here. Thank you, M. Petri. We truly appreciate it. Louise, amazing. Sonny Burnett, you guys really just honor us by supporting our show. Thank you, Bob. So very cool. Star Orchid. We honestly could not do this show without you. Hey, in French. Merci, Preston et Dolly, pour votre excellent travail on les invités extraordinaires.
Enchanté. Merci beaucoup.
All right. That said, I do want to get directly to our guests. Thank you, guys. We absolutely appreciate you guys joining us tonight. But we have to get to the show because we've got an enormous amount of information to share. We have two guests, as I said. Peter W. Merlin, who's an author and a researcher. He's got several amazing books. We'll be talking about them. And, of course, Michael Schratt, aerospace historian, researcher, and author. Got an amazing YouTube channel. Check it out. And the amazing book, Dark Files, which has just been put out on Kindle. So check that out. It's an amazing illustration of many, many really extraordinary UFO incidents. So let's talk a little bit about our guest tonight. First, we'll start with Peter W. Merlin. He has appeared in more than a dozen film and television documentaries for, get this, the History Channel, Discovery, National Geographic, Smithsonian, and others. He is the author of the book Dreamland. Here, let me just pull that up for you guys because I want you to be able to see that real quickly here. He's actually got quite a few books. I'll pull up them. Here's one, the Tonopah Test Range, Nevada Test Site, Green Light for Green Flight, NASA's Contributions to Environmentally Responsible Aviation, and Dreamland, The Secret History of Area 51. which I understand is really the go-to book on this particular subject. So we're absolutely honored to have him here tonight. What else can I tell you about him? That book is a very compelling narrative based on a treasure trove of declassified documents and interviews, and is richly illustrated with more than, get this, 700 images, many never published before. Now, Michael Schratt, who has been a guest before, but if you haven't heard of him, he is a private pilot, military aerospace historian, longtime UFO researcher, lecturer, draftsman, and an expert on classified black projects, UFO crash retrievals, the government UFO coverup, and more. He is the author of The Dark Files, as I mentioned, and is a frequent guest on our show and definitely many other radio shows and podcasts, such as Coast to Coast, and speaks at many conferences, such as Contact in the Desert. So he will be joining us shortly. He's
here.
Oh, he is.
Yes, he's waiting.
Okay. Awesome. All right, then I guess we're ready. Let's bring in our guest. Doink.
Hello, Peter.
Doink.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Peter.
Hi. How you
Good
doing?
to see you.
All right.
Good
I'll
to be
start. Such an honor, both of you, being able to join us tonight, especially you, Peter, coming at such short notice. So we really, really appreciate that, and we're both so very excited. Michael, thank you for bringing Peter on.
Sure.
And for coming on yourself. Area 51, this is going to be really interesting. It's so
Not hearing
famous.
our hosts at the moment.
Oh, you're not hearing?
Oh, you're not hearing? All right, that's odd.
I hear you, Peter.
And I hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Can you hear me, Peter?
He,
All right,
he
we got
can't hear Preston or Dolly, I guess.
Correct.
Holy cow.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
Hold on, let me see if there's anything tricky going on here. You might need to pop back out and pop back in.
Oh.
No, we need to pop out and I can't release the board. Very bad juju. Did you touch something when you let them in?
Wait. Did I just do something?
I love technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Still
Unmute me.
no?
Preston, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. I think we're all good. I think Peter needs to pop out and pop back in. That's my only.
Michael, can you hear us?
I hear you. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Peter, do you hear us?
I got nothing.
Peter can't hear you. Okay.
But he can hear you, Michael. Can you tell him to drop out and pop out and pop back in?
I hear you. I hear Peter. I don't hear Dolly now. Do I hear?
This is fun.
You don't
okay,
hear
I
Dolly
hear
at all?
Dolly.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I do hear Dolly.
Do you hear
I
Peter?
hear
though?
you.
Michael, do you hear Peter?
And I can.
And Michael,
Peter,
you're
can
the
you say
only one I
something?
hear.
Yeah. Michael, could you
Okay.
tell Peter to pop out and pop
I
back
hear
in?
Peter, and Peter hears me.
Right.
Do you hear me,
But he
Michael?
can't hear you guys.
Okay, I'm going to do something. Y'all hang on a
All
minute,
right.
okay? All right. Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me, Preston?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Peter? No? No hearing?
Okay.
Interesting.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Can you
Okay.
hear Peter when he talks?
I
I
can
want you
hear
to
Peter
tell
when he
Peter to
talks.
look for his mic thing and
Can
click on
Peter
it.
hear you?
Yeah, he can hear me.
Could
I
you
know
tell
that.
Peter to
To
log
check his
out
mic.
and log back in?
Okay.
Check his mic first. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Wait, I'm putting him on. You can hear him now.
Peter, they're asking you to check your mic to see if it's on or
It was when we got started on
it
this.
was. Okay.
Let me double check.
Ask him to log out and log back into
Can you hear
StreamYard.
me, Peter, at all?
Maybe log off and log back in, Peter. That might help.
Okay, I'll
If
just.
you want to, if you want to drop out and come back in, that's fine.
Yep, I'll give that a try.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So we all hear each other, no problem. Okay.
Yep. I hear you.
Yeah, everyone in chat can hear all of us. So thanks, guys. Hang on. You know how it goes.
Okay, let me let him in, okay?
Okay.
Don't touch it.
Now I'm hearing you.
Now you hear us? No problem. Okay.
Yes,
Okay, good.
All
that's
Good.
much better.
Excellent.
All right.
Excellent.
Okay. So thank you, Peter,
Yeah.
for joining
Good.
us on such short notice.
Yeah, this was a last minute thing, but thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say, I want Peter to have the floor here. I don't want to interrupt, but Peter is the voice of reason on this subject. He is absolutely the voice of reason. You know, I have his book here. You could see how thick this book is. This is the definitive volume on this subject. There is nobody better on this planet that knows Dreamland, Area 51, the historical background. There's no one better than Peter Merlin. Nobody.
I asked myself what sort of book I would want to read if I wanted to learn everything there was about Area 51. Then I set out to write that book.
That's right.
And the best praise I could have had from anyone is the fact that people who worked at Area 51, and I mean, you know, we're talking various different levels from aircraft technicians to all the way up to base commanders, have read this thing and they've said, yeah, this is really great. It's very accurate, very thorough. So I couldn't ask for a better review than that.
Excellent, excellent.
Very cool.
Before we get rolling, Peter, can you talk about the backstory of how this book came about? Because that's an interesting story in itself. You told it to me a couple times before, but the whole thing about the origin of this book and the backstory, how it came to be, I think that's a story in itself.
Sure, and I should probably preface it just by saying a little background on myself.
Yeah. Good.
I was born and raised in Hollywood, California. Grew up in the Hollywood Hills. Became interested in aviation and space at a very young age, and I was living in a place that was, you know, full of mysteries and weirdness anyway. At the top of Wonderland Avenue, and we had right on that street an actual secret Air Force base. If anyone's ever heard of Lookout Mountain Laboratory, you can look that up. There's a lot of good information about it now. But that had been a former radar site during World War II, and then it was converted after the war into a secret film studio in the Hollywood Hills, where the film crews would go out to places like the Nevada test site for the atomic weapons testing, or Edwards for the X-planes and things like that. And they had a whole studio hidden in the canyon. Really kind of neat place. So I always kind of had that interest in things of that nature. And then in 1983, I was reading a book about the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, which mentioned that it was test flown at a secret air base in Nevada. This place at Groom Lake, a dry lake bed that was called Area 51. And just the whole concept of this secret base, you know, in the desert was fascinating, just fascinating. So I decided, well, I want to learn everything I can about it. Of course, this was more than 40 years ago, so, you know, there was no internet then, and most of the programs that took place there were still deeply classified. So it was really hard to get information for a very long time. And over the years, I collected little tidbits here and there and gradually built up a vast database. I started meeting people who'd worked out there, hearing their stories, and it just grew from there. It became, you know, there were more programs being declassified decades later, so that helped a lot. And after a while, I had so much information that people started saying, well, you know, what are you going to do with that? You should write a book. And so I did eventually.
Very cool. So how far back does Area 51 go in history?
Well, it depends on how you want to reckon it. Now, as far as actual Area 51 as we know it, as far as the base where it is and what they do, that goes back to 1955. Now, my book covers history prior to that, just generally speaking. Groom Lake is a dry lake bed. It's about 3 miles across. And it's located deep within what's now known as the Nevada Test and Training Range. This is a Switzerland-sized chunk of federal land. in Nevada where they do all kinds of testing of aircraft and weapon systems, and it's got the nuclear proving grounds were right there. And this one section got blocked off ultimately for use as a restricted, highly restricted secret flight test facility. So this came about because of the U-2 program, which is a CIA-sponsored development of a spy plane. Back in the 1950s, the U.S. government was very worried about what the Russian-dominated Soviet Union was doing. That was a closed society. They had a strong military buildup, and they were our primary geopolitical rival. So in order to find out what was going on behind the Iron Curtain, the CIA put out a contract to build a spy plane, something that could fly higher than any existing aircraft and carry cameras and sensors to collect information. Lockheed was the company that ultimately got that contract. Kelly Johnson, their chief engineer for the Advanced Development Project section, which is known as the Skunk Works, designed this aircraft. And it looked like a jet-powered sailplane, long, thin wings, capable of flying up above 70,000 feet, which no other airplane. It was about twice as high as airliners were going at the time. So really, pretty substantial. But they wanted to test it someplace where unauthorized personnel couldn't see it. Normally, a new airplane would just be hauled out to Edwards Air Force Base and flown there. But they said, no, we want to do this someplace completely remote. So a couple guys from Lockheed got on a plane. They went out flying all over the Southwest, looking at places with dry lake beds, because a dry lake bed makes a perfect natural landing field. And eventually, Kelly Johnson picked a spot on the California-Nevada border. It wasn't too far from Burbank, where the Lockheed plant was, and he came up with a budget for a pretty low-cost little airstrip and some hangars. And the CIA said, that's great, but it's still too close to civilization. We need something more secure. So they ended up looking at the Nevada test site. And just off the corner of the area with Yucca Flat, where the nuclear weapons were being tested, there was Groom Lake. It was part of an old bombing and gunnery range. And so they took a look at it and said, yes, this is perfect. It's really remote. We're going to need to clean it up a bit. There's a lot of spent bullet casings and things like that out here. And it was going to cost at least twice as much as the original plan, which Johnson was not too thrilled with. But the CIA said, no problem, we will pay for that. So for about $832,000, something like that, they ended up with a 5,000-foot airstrip, several hangars, some dormitories and trailers and things like that. And it was a nice little airfield. And it was meant to be temporary. Mm-hmm. They would test the U-2 there, train the CIA and Air Force pilots to fly it. And when they were done, then that was going to be the end of it. And it pretty much played out like that in the beginning. The CIA ordered 20 U-2 aircraft, and so did the Air Force. And they began sending people out there. In the spring of 1955, testing went fairly well. There were some mishaps. A few people died. But, after a few years, they'd gotten some crews trained and started deploying them overseas. Well, about this time, we're looking at 1957, the atomic testing was starting to ramp up. And that was causing increasing difficulties at Groom Lake because they had to shut down operations whenever there was a test. There was radioactive fallout. It was a real problem. So eventually they decided to move the testing portion to Edwards Air Force Base, the North Base compound, and deploy all the other Air Force and CIA detachments elsewhere. And the Groom Lake base was shut down for about 2 years.
Wow. Peter, can you talk very briefly about Richard Bissell's involvement in the U-2 program?
Sure. Bissell was the primary CIA guy who was responsible for getting the U2 program going and getting Kelly Johnson and his team to be on board with the whole project. He was one of the people who was instrumental in the decision to use the Groom Lake site,
Right.
which was suggested by Colonel Ozzie Ritland, who was the Air Force liaison to the U2 project. And he knew about Groom Lake because he piloted the planes that dropped nuclear weapons at Yucca Flat.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And then, Peter, can you talk about Tony LeVere, Kelly Johnson, the Beach Bonanza, and the shot puts?
Right. That's and I write about that in my book too.
Yes.
So when Tony LeVere, who was the chief test pilot for the U2 program, he went out searching for these lake beds and stuff, and they went out using a Beechcraft twin Bonanza that Lockheed owned, and they just land on a lake bed somewhere, get out and take a steel ball that weighed about 15 pounds, had a little handle on it, and you'd hold it up about 6 feet above the ground and drop it, and it would make a little crater on the dry lake bed. And depending on the width and depth of the crater, you could determine whether or not the surface was likely to support airplanes. And that same method was used for testing lake beds for landing the X-15 rocket plane that NASA tested over Utah and Nevada and California.
Nice, nice. One other thing, Peter, please discuss how Kelly Johnson saved time and money by modifying the F-104, which became the configuration for the U-2.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to get into some of the minutiae of the U-2 design, Kelly had also designed the F-104 Starfighter, which was a single-engine jet-powered aircraft capable of Mach 2 flight. It had very short wings. It was not the most maneuverable fighter ever, but it was good for a zoom climb. You could get it up to pretty high altitude with all that power. And in order to design the U-2, Kelly started with the F-104, looked at what you could change on it to make it lighter weight, to add longer wings, and so on. So his original design for what became the U-2 basically looked like an F-104 with ridiculously long wings. And eventually he kind of moved away from that into something more like the jet-powered sailplane type configuration. He made it as lightweight as possible, meaning as few parts as they could get away with, lightweight aluminum alloys, and as few fasteners as possible. Anything they could do to reduce weight would give them more altitude.
Right.
So how long did the U-2 remain secret?
Pardon?
How long did the U-2 remain secret? Because this was all completely classified, right?
Sure. And the interest thank you for that question, because it became pretty apparent that once they started deploying the U-2 overseas, obviously people were going to see it. It would be impossible to keep it a total secret. So Lockheed and the CIA and the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which is the predecessor to NASA, got together and came up with a cover story. And it was released through the NACA, claiming that that agency was conducting high altitude weather research with support from the Air Force. That way they could send these planes anywhere in the world and just say, hey, we're doing weather research. And in order to make this story somewhat true, or at least give it some more credibility, whenever the U-2 was flown on test or training missions and not carrying camera equipment, they put actual NACA weather research instrumentation in the aircraft, collected data, and then scientists used that data for real weather research and published the reports. These were unclassified reports, which sometimes had pictures of the U-2 aircraft and said, we're flying this U-2 from Watertown Airstrip, Nevada, which is what the Groom Lake site was known as at that time. So that cover story was pretty good until they started going overseas, and the journalists in places like England and Germany were much more skeptical. They said, that's some really, really high weather you're looking at. And granted, you could argue that, they were using it for planning for future airliners and things like that. But really, I think a lot of people pretty much recognized that this was going to be a spy plane, and it wasn't a very good cover story. The CIA knew that the U-2 was going to be vulnerable, that even with some of the experiments they did to reduce its radar signature, the Russians would be able to track it, which they did pretty regularly. And the Russians were working on more powerful surface-to-air missiles that could shoot it down despite the high altitude. And so the CIA knew that eventually the U-2 would no longer be a viable option. It was considered a stopgap measure until they could come up with something that could fly higher and faster. And they started working on that in the late 1950s. So 1958, and this was the CIA's Project Oxcart. And that's really why Area 51 is what it is today, because that little Watertown airstrip that got closed down in the summer of 1957 suddenly became useful again. In 1959, Lockheed was testing the radar signature of scale models of the Oxcart aircraft, which was called the A-12. And Kelly Johnson didn't like the test range they were using at Indian Springs, about an hour north of Las Vegas, because it was next to a highway. People could see these designs. So he said, how about we go back to Groom Lake and build our radar cross-section facility there? So that got approved. And EG&G Special Projects was the contractor that built the radar site there. They used some of the old facility that existed during the U-2 program and added more infrastructure and radar sites and things like that.
I have one other question about the U-2. How much does it cost? How much does it cost the taxpayer to make one of these guys?
Yeah, the U-2s were relatively inexpensive. And the ironic thing is, despite the fact that it was meant to be a stopgap measure that wouldn't be used for very long, there are still U-2s flying today. The ones that are currently flying were built in 1980. They're an upgraded model. They're larger, more capable than the original ones, but it's still substantially the same configuration. And again, as far as aircraft go overall, they cost less than your typical fighter plane. So that's something.
Can you talk about Tony LeVere's first impressions on first flight?
Yeah. Tony LeVere really didn't care for the handling qualities, particularly during landing, because this thing, again, to reduce weight, it did not have the standard tricycle landing gear like you see on most aircraft. It had a bicycle configuration, basically. There was a set of main wheels and some tiny little wheels at the back by the tail. And this thing, because of its long wings, this airplane liked to fly. It wanted to remain airborne. I mean, it was difficult to get it to touch down. Once you brought it down into ground effect, it just wanted to stay airborne. So LeVere had to figure out how to land it. Kelly Johnson told him to put the main gear down first and then the tail wheel, or vice versa, and try these things. And it was really rough. He almost killed himself. LeVere ultimately said, no, you got to put both sets of wheels down simultaneously, which he did, and that worked out fine. It was a tricky method of landing, and all the pilots who learned to fly it had to master that.
Okay. Back onto the A-12 you were talking about, Peter. Can you discuss the efficiency and the performance is directly related to the inlet spike, and talk about Ben's involvement in that?
All right. Yeah, let me come around to that. So the A-12 was a very different aircraft from the U-2. It was large, about 100 and almost. It was over 100 feet long. It was made mostly of titanium alloys. The first one was made all titanium alloy, but then the production models were built with large composite structures for the edges of the fuselage called chines, the inlet cones, the tails, and other things. These were radar absorbent structures, which were pretty advanced for its time. It was designed to fly at altitudes up to 90,000 feet at speeds of more than 2,100 miles per hour. You're looking at a cruising speed of Mach 3.2. And this was accomplished through the unique combination of the engines and the inlets and nacelles. The twin engines were mounted mid-span in the wing. They were turbojet engines. I think they generated something like 34,000 pounds of thrust each. And they were within a nacelle structure with a pointed inlet cone, which was movable.
Yeah.
So when the pilot took off, he was using the turbojet engine. He'd accelerate to about Mach 2.4, and then he would move that inlet cone to adjust the airflow, while simultaneously bypassing the engine. So the airflow was now going mostly around the engine, and only about 15% of the thrust was due to the turbojets. The rest was coming from that inlet and nacelle combo. So you had a combination of the turbojet, which is mostly along for the ride at this point, and a ramjet. So it's a turbo ramjet assembly.
It lifted
very
it
impressive
more
for
too,
its time.
didn't it?
What's that?
It gave it more lift, didn't it?
Well, it was primarily thrust. The lift, if you look at the picture of the aircraft, if you want to bring that up again, you can see that long forward fuselage. See how the edges are flattened down into chines. That provided a lot of extra lift on the front end, which was very nice. You've got delta wing configuration with elevons at the back and the twin all moving rudders. So yeah, it was quite an impressive design, very advanced for its time. Still looks futuristic even today. Hard to believe it made its first flight in 1962.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right.
Looks fun to fly.
No doubt. Peter, can we discuss the D-21 drone and the accident between the M-21 and the D-21?
Sure. But before I get to that, I just want to mention that, as I said, they were testing radar models of this A-12 at Groom Lake, and that's why they started building it up in 1959. And that construction project was handled by a company called Reynolds Electrical and Engineering Company, or RECO, and it was one of their money guys who was working on the budget for this project, and he had to give it a name, so he called it Project 51. And that is how Area 51 got its name.
Okay.
And that became the official name. Largely because by the time this was happening, and they were building it in 1960, building it up, they needed a permanent place to test and operate the A-12. And again, it's a super secret project. It was an unacknowledged special access program, a black program. Nobody outside the program was supposed to know that this plane even existed. It was much more secret than the U-2. And so they figured, well, we'd like to fly it out of Area 51, but we don't have the infrastructure. So they had to build a new runway and new hangars and fuel farm and dormitories and buildings and everything else, which is how it became a permanent facility and where it's grown from that to today. So that's a really important thing, is that the A-12 program, Oxcart, is what made Area 51 a permanent site and also got it its name. So, Michael, you asked about the D-21.
Yes.
Kelly Johnson envisioned the A-12 as being something he could build upon and develop using a common airframe and adjusting it for different missions. So there was a version called the AF-12, which is an interceptor, later designated YF-12A. There was the R-12, which became the SR-71 for the Air Force. And then the M-21 was a mothership. It has second position for a launch control officer, and you could launch a drone off the top of the aircraft. And the drone looked almost like a mini A-12. It has a single tail fin, a single engine, which is a ramjet. There you go. And that was also made with titanium and radar absorbent structures around the edges. It was it was the stealthiest thing that Lockheed had built up to that point. And so it was very, very difficult to detect by radar. It was designed for one-time use. there was several dozen of these were made, or a couple dozen, however many there were like 38 of them, I think. They were designed for one-time use each. It would carry a camera in a ejectable pod. You'd launch it off the back of this M21 mothership. It would fly its mission autonomously, pre-programmed, take pictures in denied territory, come out to a rendezvous point, jettison the camera, and then self-destruct. And the camera package would be picked up in midair from a C-130.
Wow.
Where would it self-destruct? Over
What's
what?
that?
Did it self-destruct over the water or landmass? What?
Oh yeah, usually over the ocean. It's usually where they have the meeting points. And so they tested this several times with some success, but it was a very dangerous maneuver to separate this thing from the mothership. And on one attempt, the drone had an engine unstart, and it hit the mothership, broke it apart. Both vehicles were destroyed. The two crewmen bailed out of the M21. One of them survived. The other drowned in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California.
Wow.
Kelly Johnson, by this point, already was working on an alternative, which was to launch the D-21 from beneath the wing of a B-52.
Yeah.
B-52 obviously can't fly at the Mach 3 speed you need for ramjet ignition. So they stuck a big solid fuel rocket motor under the drone and hung this beneath the wing of the B-52. And so you could take that to wherever you needed to launch it, drop the whole stack, fire off the rocket engine, propel it up to Mach 3 speeds so that the ramjet can get going. The rocket fuel burns out, and the booster falls away, the drone goes on its mission, and everything's the same.
What year was that?
All of the D-21 stuff started in 1966. And so by 67, they were doing what was called D-21B with the B-52.
Yeah.
One of the initial tests, it was a captive carry mission out of Area 51. They were just going to carry the drones and do some systems tests before launching. And there was a malfunction, and the stack dropped away from the wing of the B-52. And the engine, the rocket motor fired, but nobody had programmed the drone for a mission because it wasn't supposed to fly. It was just going to hang under the wing. And it was off on its own. And so it ended up crashing in the desert in central Nevada, in a rural area near some ranches. So people out there saw this thing come flaming out of the sky, didn't know what the heck it was, slam into the desert and explode. And some of the ranchers and other people went out there and took a look, and one guy was taking pictures of it, and all of a sudden helicopters are showing up, and you got these heavily armed guys from the government saying, get back, forget what you've seen, that whole kind of thing. So you can imagine what that was like.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who had taken the pictures, they got that film from him. I've got the whole story in my book, but and they cleaned up the site, and then they left. And years later, I only heard about that story because it was briefly mentioned in an official history of the Lockheed Skunk Works by Jay Miller, in which they quoted Kelly Johnson, I think, as saying that it must have been quite a sight from the ground when this thing crashed. But it never made the news. None of those people who lived out there ever talked about it.
No.
No, I'm sure they had agents all over the place going, here, we're going to pay you, and that's going up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they basically just put the fear in them. So I ended up contacting a couple of the people who lived out there at the time, a couple of witnesses. And also, by that time, I had met the project officer and the launch control officer who was on the B-52 responsible for that drone. And I asked all these people, I said, I want to go out and find this crash site. Where was it? Because, I wasn't able to find any useful information. Even the declassified material I got didn't have a map or really, really good directions. But, the Air Force guys that I talked to, the project officer and the launch control officer, they looked at my map and they indicated a general area where they thought it was. And the ranchers also did this, and they indicated the same area, though one of them was really kind of upset at being contacted because he'd been so scared by these government people years earlier that he at first didn't even want to talk about it. But I thought, well, I'm going to go out there and look for this crash site. And of course, you know, every one of them said, oh yeah, we cleaned up every trace. You know, you could go there and you'd never know anything happened. So I went out there with a friend, and we walked around the desert for miles and miles, and you know, we didn't find anything. So I went back, and we walked around a lot more part of the desert, and we still didn't find anything. So I went back again, this time with a couple other guys, and we spread out in a line about 100 feet apart. We walked for a mile. Then we turned, we started working our way back. And after a while, I saw something in the distance. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What's that? And my first thought was, well, we're in a ranching area, and also there's oil wells and things like that. And I thought, it looks like it's probably some junk from that. But it looked really interesting. So the closer I got, the more interesting it looked. And pretty soon I was standing in a bunch of wreckage. And there were some recognizable components like the nose cone from the rocket booster.
Wow.
And parts of Lockheed Skunk Works inspection stamps and D-21 part numbers and things like that. The biggest piece, I think, probably weighed around 200 pounds or so.
No way. That's a huge piece.
So what happened to that? Who got
Well,
it?
I couldn't bring myself to leave it there. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. So the D-21, it was not a very successful program overall. There were a number of test flights over the Pacific Ocean that were quite successful, and then about 4 operational missions over China, which I think they lost the camera package in 1 or 2 of those incidents, and one of the drones disappeared and ended up in Russia, where a Russian company reverse engineered it. And another drone ended up in China, where the Chinese People's Army collected it, and it's in a museum today in China.
Peter, before we leave the Blackbirds, can we talk about the front companies for the titanium and the mistake that President Johnson made?
Okay, I'm not sure which mistake, but
The
as far as the
naming mistake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then thanks. Yeah. Okay. Because it's important that we mention that, because it's not what everybody thinks.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the titanium went, one of the big ironies is that the best supplier of titanium ore in the world was Russia. And here we were planning to use that to build plans to spy on them and their allies. And we ended up using front companies to buy all this titanium that we kind of sent back to them in a lot of ways. As far as the thing about President Lyndon B. Johnson and the SR-71, there's a myth that when Johnson announced the existence of the SR-71, the Air Force version of the Blackbird, that he somehow screwed up, that he was supposed to call it the RS-71, and they reversed the letters, and that was a mistake on him. But that's not the case.
Really? Okay.
And I cannot take credit for finding that. One of the former commanders of the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing did some research at the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library, because he was really curious about this story too. And it turned out that what had happened was the original plan was to call the aircraft the RS-71. This is the follow-on to the RS-70, which is going to be the North American Aviation Valkyrie, which is a bomber that got canceled. And I guess General LeMay of Strategic Air Command didn't like the designation, so he said I wanted to be SR-71 for Strategic Reconnaissance, and that's what it was. Now, President Lyndon Johnson said the right thing during his speech.
He did.
But it was transcribed incorrectly by his secretary, whoever put the transcriptions together and handed them out to the press corps, and so the myth was born.
Mm-hmm. And then they had to change all the drawings, correct?
Well, no, because it was
No.
it was already going to be the SR-71, so it wasn't
Okay.
a problem.
Okay, good. Reading your book, Peter, I noticed that former President Bush visited Area 51 to examine the Red Hats. Could you drill down that a little bit?
Yes, he was the
Put my thing in here.
George H.W. Bush was the head of the CIA, and in the 70s, he got an opportunity to go out to Area 51 to visit with the Red Hat Squadron, which was formerly known as the 6513th Test Squadron. These were the guys with Air Force Systems Command who did technical evaluations of Soviet fighter planes. They'd been doing that work since the late 1960s. I sent you guys a picture of Half Donut, which was the MiG-21. Was tested in 1968 initially. If you can find that, it's the Delta Wing silver airplane with the U.S. markings on the side.
I'll see if I can find that.
Okay. So this MiG-21 was acquired with the help of Israel. They had gotten it from an Iraqi defector in 1967. And, this is in the middle of the Vietnam War, the Southeast Asia conflict, where U.S. airmen were really getting their butts kicked in the air war. The kill ratio was terrible. And we needed to learn how to fight these Soviet aircraft, how to outperform them, outgun them, whatever it took. So we were really interested in acquiring these. And the first one was a MiG-21, which was disassembled in Israel and flown to Area 51 in a cargo plane, reassembled.
Nope, that's Half Blue.
Nope.
That's not it?
Not it. Silver plane with desert background. You'll
All right.
pretty sure I sent that there.
Maybe it's this one.
There we go. And I love this picture. This is the first. This is the first picture I ever got to see of a MiG in U.S. markings. And what's really neat about it now, looking at it, is that I can tell from the background. Zoom out just a little bit. I can tell from that background that this picture was taken directly over Groom Lake.
Yeah,
because in the background, right in the middle of the picture, is a hill with light-colored markings on it. That's called Whitesides Hill, which is one of the last close public viewing points before the Air Force took it away from us. There we go. So I've stood on that hill, and now you've got Freedom Ridge in the middle of the picture, and I've been on that hill too. Those were the two public viewing points that were closest to Area 51 in the 1990s before the Air Force took them away. Anyway, so we acquired other Soviet fighters, MiG-17s, MiG-23s, Su-17s, Su-22s, and all these different things. And we're still doing that sort of thing. It's a big program. It's gone on for decades. And there were two components. One was technical evaluation to find out what the aircraft were made of, how they operated, what their limitations were, and then tactical evaluation, testing it against all of our combat aircraft, look at it with radar, with infrared sensors, figuring out how do we fight against this thing so we can kill it in combat. And the results of these tests were disseminated to frontline fighter pilots and used to great advantage during the Southeast Asia conflict and subsequently into the modern era. So really, really pretty cool. They're still doing this. Back in 2009, someone got pictures of a MiG-29 out there, Su-27. There was a Su-27 that crashed in 2017. And it's a joint Air Force Navy evaluation program exploiting the adversary technology. And
exactly how did we get those, Peter? Through the CIA? What was the process there?
Yeah, so the process of acquiring these was quite varied. Initially, we relied heavily on allies like Israel, because they had captured some aircraft, and then through diplomatic relations with Egypt, we were able to get a bunch of more things, and also Indonesia supplied a lot of stuff, and India, and really anyone who we could deal with and either beg, borrow, steal, buy, whatever it took to get these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big effort was to keep them flying, because obviously you're not going to be able to just buy spare parts anywhere.
Yeah.
So the maintenance guys are the real heroes on that project, because they kept these things flying. And Tactical Air Command kind of spun off their own exercise for a while in the late 1970s. It was called Constant Peg. They moved, initially they were at Area 51, then they moved up to Tonopah Test Range and established a squadron there that had more than a dozen of these aircraft, where they could expose thousands, literally more than I think 6,000 U.S. airmen were exposed to combat over Nevada with these actual MiGs.
Wow.
So that was kind of neat, because they were used to flying against stand-ins like the A4, the F5, or things like that that could pretend to be MiGs, but nothing quite beats having an actual piece of adversary hardware to play with.
Where are those planes now, Peter?
Some of those planes have been scrapped.
Really?
One of the MiG-21s ended up on San Nicolas Island in a junkyard. Another one is wrecked out on the Nevada Test and Training Range. Just they put it out there like a target. Some of them are in museums, though, on museum displays. I got to see a MiG-23 and a Su-27 in the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. There are others in different museums. I'm glad they saved some of them.
I think we should move on to the development of Have Blue, if we can.
Sure. In the 1970s, there was a big change in aerial combat with what's called the stealth revolution. And that is, up to that point, aviation, in terms of developing fighter planes, they were looking at making planes that were more maneuverable. But all of a sudden, someone said, hey, maybe we should just make them invisible. Invisible to radar, that is, and other sensors. So that's where we get our stealth planes. The technical term is low observables, but we just usually call it stealth. It's a way of making an aircraft virtually invisible to detection by radar, by infrared sensors, reducing acoustics, if you can, acoustic signatures, visual signature to the extent possible, which is more difficult. But the first thing they worked hard on was the radar signature. And in the early days, the easiest way to do that, they could calculate the radar cross-section of a flat plate. There was a Russian physicist who had written a paper, Pyotr Ufimtsev, and someone at Lockheed read this paper and said, hey, we can use this idea. And he wrote up a computer program allowing them to calculate the radar signature of flat plates and making an aircraft out of a flat plate set of shapes, which is where we get Have Blue. It was our first flyable one. They started with that D-21 shape because that was the stealthiest thing Lockheed had designed up to that point, but then eventually abandoned it for the faceted shape we see here now. The original test shape that was put in an indoor RCS range was nicknamed the Hopeless Diamond, and Kelly Johnson hated it. He thought it looked like a tin shed in a hurricane. It was pretty ugly, and the airplane they built, was not exactly a beauty winner either. As you can see, this thing is faceted like a gem. Even the wings, even the aerodynamic surfaces are faceted, which is a nightmare for aerodynamicists. It's wonderful for electrical scientists and radar scientists because this is a very stealthy shape. It will reflect radar waves away from the receiver, and if you coat it with radar absorbent materials, then that will help absorb a lot of the energy. So the energy that is reflected is much weaker.
I have a question. When did they develop the radar absorbent materials?
Oh, that goes back as far as radar goes back. So you can, during World War II, when radar was being used, people were coming up with anti-radar materials, which are similar in principle to the ones that we're using today, which Yeah, you got several different kinds. The one that's pretty much most people talk about is a magnetic absorber, and this is essentially microscopic particles of carbonyl iron, ferrites, suspended in a synthetic polymer matrix, so plastic or rubber. The plastic or rubber is invisible to radar, and so it's like a cloud of little tiny metal particles, and that's what absorbs the radar waves. There are other kinds. There's circuit analog absorbers and things that I don't know enough about electrical engineering to really explain them well, but if you combine these, you can cover a wide range of radar frequencies and make an aircraft pretty invisible.
Peter, can you discuss Ben Rich's meeting at the Pentagon with the high-level brass there and the ball bearings and the conference table?
Oh yeah, so Ben Rich was Kelly Johnson's successor as far as the chief engineer of the Skunk Works, and he was the one who oversaw the development of these stealthy aircraft in the early days. He initially had showed this to Kelly Johnson, who literally kicked him in the butt because he thought it was such a horrible looking design, but it worked well. And the way that Ben Rich liked to sell the design when he talked to the high level people who would be funding this sort of thing is he would take a ball bearing and roll that across the desk of his whoever he was talking to and say, you see that is the radar cross section of this airplane. It's not he used to say it wasn't comparable to the radar cross section of, say, an eagle. It was more like an eagle's eyeball. So very, very tiny.
Wow.
And then go ahead, Peter.
Oh, sorry. So obviously the government didn't want to just sole source this stuff. Lockheed was competing against Northrop for the contract to develop first a stealth demonstrator and then later a stealth combat aircraft. Lockheed won the initial competition because their design just was a little better in some aspects. But the government told Northrop, hey, you guys keep your team together. We need you because we want to diversify our base, our industrial base on this stuff. And that was a smart move for Northrop to stay in the game because they ended up getting some really big contracts later on. Lockheed showed that their half blue was very effective from a survivability standpoint. They sort of scaled it up. I sent you a picture of an F-117A, and you can see that's the that was the version that turned out to be the operational combat aircraft. It's called the stealth fighter, but it's really an attack aircraft. It's not designed for air-to-air combat. It's strictly designed to carry a couple bombs that you can drop with precision on a target. Used very effectively during Operation Desert Storm, flying through the heavily defended airspace over places like Baghdad without being shot down. Pretty miraculous. Hitting their targets and doing a lot of damage. It's but Northrop, they stayed in the game. They developed another demonstrator, and I also sent you a picture of that, Tacit Blue, which is a weird one. It kind of looks like they threw away the plane and kept the box that came in.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I like that.
I mean, which one is it?
It's the one that looks like a snow shovel.
Yeah.
Or a loaf of bread.
It was sometimes nicknamed the alien school bus or the submarine.
Maybe this one?
There it is.
There you go. That's the one.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean,
does look like a snow shovel.
That's pretty hideous. And that's in the Air Force Museum as well, if you ever want to see it. This was designed to be a reconnaissance aircraft that would be in the forward edge of the battle area and fly in daylight rather than the F-117A that was designed to fly in the nighttime. But ultimately, that idea was abandoned, and the technology that went into this one-of-a-kind demonstrator was used to develop the B-2 stealth bomber, the tri-surface standoff attack missile, and other systems. And so its legacy continues on. But yeah, this was a really unique piece of hardware here.
Is that an air intake there on the top?
It is, and it was really bad for airflow, particularly during the ground tests. The engine, they had to sit a C-130 in front of it, tied down and running its engines to put air through that.
Oh my gosh.
And you have two engines side by side that you needed to keep running together, and you could have one that kind of seizes up. And yeah, it was a challenge, but it did prove the technology, and it was the first aircraft to really demonstrate stealth technology using curved surfaces. If you look at the B-2 now, obviously they got away from the whole facet idea, and it's just all curved airfoils. And the newer B-21 Raider is really orders of magnitude beyond any of this stuff.
Peter, can we discuss very briefly Dyson's dock?
Yeah, so some people have kicked around the name Dyson's dock, and that's usually along with a claim that it was a secret museum at Groom Lake for projects like Tacit Blue before it was declassified, and senior prom and various other things, whatever they have to have, and some of the MiGs as well. I am not convinced that Dyson's dock is the name of that museum. I think it's entirely possible that somebody misconstrued that Dyson's dock was the name for Hangar 8, which is a Tacit Blue hangar. Ken Dyson was the CTF commander out there for a while, and so they probably called it Dyson's dock because they referred to that plane sometimes as the submarine. They called the chief pilot Captain Nemo. So they also referred to the plane as Shamu, like the killer whale at SeaWorld.
Yeah.
But the museum that Michael has alluded to is a real thing. That existed. Tacit Blue was there. It sat in there for quite a few years, partially disassembled, and they, certain cleared personnel, probably people from Congress and intelligence committees and defense and stuff like that, got to see it, along with some of the other things, Red Hat's MiGs and cruise missile prototypes and UAVs and whatever they had in there. Who knows? At one point, a guy was saying, we should take Tacit Blue and clean it up and restore it. And the guy who was the chief civilian out there at the time said, no, you don't want to do that. They'll put it in the Air Force Museum. And they did. So I got to see it in 1996. That picture on the cover of my book is a picture I took then.
Oh, nice. Now, wasn't there supposed to be something on Pistol Range Road, Peter?
Well, yeah, Pistol Range Road is, as you would expect, goes to the pistol range where the security guys practice. And next to that is the fenced boneyard where they have outdoor storage for a lot of stuff they're getting rid of. But there was also a secure building in which to store whatever was going to the boneyard that they didn't want to leave sitting outside where anyone could see it. So, yeah.
Okay. And then really quickly, Sam's place.
Right. Sam Mitchell was the last CIA commander of the base before it was transferred to the Air Force in the late 1970s. And the kind of recreation center there, the bar and grill that's next to the softball diamond, is named Sam's Place after him, which is kind of neat.
Really quickly, Peter, we were kind of going into the F-117. Can you talk about the covert C-5 Galaxy landings at Burbank?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So each of the F-117 airframes, and there were 5 pre-production aircraft and 59 production models, every single one of them, when it was near to completion at the Burbank plant, got loaded into a C-5 cargo plane and flown out to Area 51. And these flights took place late at night. So I heard about this originally from my father, who had seen some of these. And, so it's nighttime. This big C-5 cargo plane would fly in, land at Burbank, taxi down to the Lockheed plant. pull into the ramp, and all the lights at Lockheed would go off. It would just go dark. And the F-117 airframe was on a cart. It was covered in a tarp, so you couldn't see what it looked like. And they'd shove it into the cargo plane, close it up, and take off. And they did this with the entire production run. I got to see one of those C-5s landing one time. And people from all over the local area, they saw these things coming in. They would drop whatever they were doing, watching television, cooking, whatever, and they'd drive over to the airport and sit outside the fence to watch this plane take off. It became, the secret flight became just such a huge show for the locals. It was just amazing.
They used to fly them into Tyndall Air Force Base as well in the 90s.
Yep.
They're big, aren't they? Yeah.
Interesting.
I've watched them come in and take off and load, actually.
Yes.
I didn't get to see top secret stuff, but I saw them load, yeah.
Peter, what secrets do you think Ken Dyson took to his grave?
That's a good question. I knew Ken. He liked me a lot. There were a lot of things he would not talk about. Other people who knew him said he was the most closed-mouthed person that they knew, to the extent that, he did all those flights in Have Blue and Tacit Blue. Right. And from what I hear, he did not put those in his flight log.
Wow.
I have never heard of a pilot not recording flights in the aircraft that they flew. I mean, usually you would put, some designation that would not give away the show. That's where designations like F-117A come from, because these guys are out there flying top secret test aircraft. Like if you're flying a MiG-21, and that's a secret program, you can't put MiG-21 in your logbook. So the guys who were doing that said, okay, we need to call it something. So they came up with a designation that had not been used and would never be used, because by the time, this was in the 1960s, they'd abandoned the Century series of aircraft designations, which had ended with F-111. And there had been the early version of the F-4 Phantom was called the YF-110A. So they said, okay, we're going to call our MiG-21 the YF-110B. So they did. And the next year, when they got a couple MiG-17s, they needed to call those something. So they called them the YF-113A and YF-114C. And so you have other things like the YF-117A, the YF-118G, and so on and so forth. In more recent years, there have been some curious designations, such as YF-24, X-273, X-169A. I mean, just whatever weird designation they can come up with that won't tell anybody anything, that's what they use.
Before we get too far along, I'm very curious about this picture you sent me, because of all of them, this one looks like a UFO.
Right, and that is a nice picture of the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber, as seen from the side, which is one of the angles from which it looks more like a UFO than anything. I sent you a picture of a T-shirt, some artwork on a T-shirt for the B-2 that I got from the B-2 test force at Edwards.
That would be interesting.
If you can find that, that's kind of a really neat one. So one says the truth is up there or something, or out there.
Yeah.
Yes, the B-2. There you go.
Oh, okay.
So from certain angles, the B-2 looks very much like a flying saucer. And interesting thing about that, I worked at Edwards Air Force Base for many years. I used to see the B-2 all the time. It would taxi right past my office. I watched it fly. I knew exactly what it was and what it looked like. But one time I was in the San Fernando Valley in Studio City, and a B-2 flew over, and because it was so out of its normal context, for a moment, I didn't know what I was looking at. And then I realized, oh yes, they just did a flyby of the Rose Parade, Pasadena. But that shirt design that you just had up there, that is from the B-2 Combined Test Force at Edwards.
That's cool.
I got it from them.
I always thought they looked like sparrows when they went by sideways. See them side.
Yeah, it definitely has a bird beak appearance, and the new B-21 Raider looks like that as well, even more so.
Peter, can you discuss the incident that Robert Bond had with Ben over at Burbank and then what eventually happened to Robert Bond flying the MiG-21.
Sure. Yeah, I think I can cover that. So, General Robert M. Bond, Bobby Bond, he was a vice commander of Air Force Systems Command.
Yeah.
He was very heavily involved in the early stealth programs, working closely with Ben Rich on Have Blue and F-117, getting these projects off the ground. And so he would occasionally visit the skunk works in Burbank. And one incident that Ben Rich talks about in his autobiography is that Bobby Bond showed up and they were in the skunk works and there was a locked door for some Navy program, which Bond was just desperate to get in and see what that was. And he was mad when Ben told him that he couldn't know that. As it turns out, it was Tacit Gold, which was the stealth ship that became known as
Sea Shadow?
Sea Shadow, yes. It was, ultimately became the Sea Shadow, which is a one-of-a-kind demonstrator for a stealthy combat ship.
You send a picture of that to Preston?
I did not, sadly.
It's easy to find. It's easy
to find. And I got to see the Sea Shadow once down in Long Beach.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say that it eventually got scrapped. It would have been nice if they could have kept it around for a museum, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And you want me to talk about what happened to Bobby Bond? Yeah. So as I said, he was vice commander of Air Force Systems Command, and he would occasionally visit Area 51 to see about the things going on out there. In 1983, in March, he went out there to visit the F-117A test force, and he got to fly the F-117A, which is pretty amazing because it's a one-seat aircraft. There's the Sea Shadow. You're wondering what that looks like.
Looks like Manta Ray to me, just saying.
Yeah, in fact, you can see that looks very similar to the F-117 and the way it's faceted.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Bond went out to Area 51 and he said, I want to fly the F-117A. And it's a single seat aircraft, so you can't go up with an instructor. He flew the simulator, figured out what he was supposed to do, learned the procedures, and he went up and he did 2 flights. He did 2 orientation flights. And then he came back in April and he visited the Red Hats. And he said, I want to fly the MiG-23.
Okay.
It's also a single seat aircraft. And pilots who have flown the MiG-23 have pretty much universally said, this is a terrible aircraft that tried to kill me every time I got in the cockpit.
So did they warn him about that?
Yeah, you bet they did. They gave him a full briefing, let him fly whatever. I don't know if they had a simulator for that, but they gave him a full briefing and the procedures and all that. And unfortunately, while he was flying, probably around Mach 2, with the wings swept, he lost control, and his last radio transmission indicated that he was out of control and was going to eject. And he did. He ejected at high speed and died in the process. I have gone out to the Nevada test site. The airplane crashed near Little Skull Mountain. I tried to find the crash site in Area 25. One of the Wackenhut guards tried to help me out. He did a little scouting around first and also provided some guidance when we went out there. And also took me to the spot where Bond's body was found. There's a memorial marker there to this day, and there's a picture of it in my book.
Wow.
So he was well respected by the people who worked for him, but the Red Hats folks and a lot of others have been very critical of his flying these planes because, they thought a senior officer like that probably shouldn't be risking himself and the assets like that.
Right.
That's the MiG-23.
A lot of money went into making that guy, and he took it down with a plane.
Yeah. So there's a picture of a MiG-23. It's a variable geometry wing. You can see the wings are swept forward here for the lower speed flight and sweeps back for high speed flight. The Red Eagles, who flew the MiGs at Tonopah Test Range, crashed several of these things.
Wow.
But fortunately survived.
Peter, can you comment on the recent hangar expansion at the test site?
At Groom Lake.
At Groom Lake, yeah.
Yeah. So the nice thing about satellite photography, it's available to us, full color imagery with resolution better than 1 meter, better than a half meter. It's unbelievable. The resolution is available. Something that used to be available only to the intelligence community is now something we can look at on our phone or laptop. This picture is not from satellite photography. This is from someone flying in the airspace. You'd think that the airspace was always restricted, but there are times when it's open. And these pictures were taken by a guy who did fly through the airspace and took a bunch of shots and posted them on the internet and then got talked to by AFOSI.
Wow.
But one of the things we can see from these low altitude images as well as the high altitude satellite imagery is that there's been a lot of construction out there. Hangars have been expanded. One of the hangar areas has been given some additional aircraft shelters that provide cover for the workers and also, incidentally, provide cover from satellite photography.
Yeah.
And that is true also on the north end of the ramp where the chase planes are usually parked. There are some shelters there now. Some people, someone took some pictures recently from Tickaboo Peak where you could surprisingly almost read license plate numbers from 26 miles away. Here's a shot that's a little bit older, but it shows you the north ramp and the 4 big hangars up there, as well as the old housing units. Anyway, the important thing to note is that, let's see, by the mid-1980s, there were approximately 23 hangars on base. Yeah. And you think, wow, that's a lot of hangars, and it is. And now there are more hangars. And over the years, some pretty big ones have been built. There was one built between 2007 2009 for a highly classified stealthy unmanned aerial vehicle, which has been produced in some numbers now. It made its first flight in 2010 and is still not acknowledged by the Air Force. It's been called the RQ-180 in the aviation press. I do not know if that's an actual designation or if that's just something somebody made up, because you got to call it something. But
you know about its specs at all?
It is probably, I want to say it's probably smaller. It's smaller than the B-21, but it's larger than the RQ-170, which is a different stealthy UAV. It's the technology built into it. It's supposed to have really good communications and sensors and stealth, the orders of magnitude above the earlier stuff. I'm guessing that Northrop Grumman won the B-21 contract largely on the strength of having produced this RQ-180 and showing what they could do. It's supposedly a really impressive aircraft. It's been reported on over the years by Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine. There are still test units doing operational testing, but I think it's been deployed operationally by now long since. As I said, it made its first flight in 2010, entered operational test and evaluation in 2014, and I have reason to believe there's probably more than 24 of them now.
Peter, can you talk about the comments in the early to mid 1990s that mentioned the quote-unquote sky tearing and what was responsible for the airquakes booming the Los Angeles basin around that time frame?
Right. So during the mid 1990s, all right, there's the thing that that was one of the artist concepts of an RQ-180. Not sure how accurate it is, but probably reasonably close, as much as you could hope for. So yeah, the skyquakes of the 1990s. There were these incidents where in Southern California, it felt like you were having an earthquake, but the Caltech seismic sensors were saying, no, there's no ground movement. It's something in the air. I have to admit, I was kind of skeptical of it at first. A lot of people were talking about it, but I thought, I don't know, it sounds kind of hinky. But then one day I experienced it myself. I was at home up on the top of the Hollywood Hills, and I thought we were having an earthquake. I really did. The whole house shook. It felt exactly like an earthquake. And my father said, did you feel that? It was like a freight train coming through. Well, later we watched the news, and sure enough, it was one of these skyquakes. There have been a number of explanations. Some people theorize it was a high-speed test aircraft. That has not been fully debunked yet. Other people thought it might be an acoustic phenomenon of fighter planes off the coast of California. Could be true. I don't know. I've never heard that in any other circumstances, but it just seemed to be a thing that was happening back then.
What year was
for
that?
a while. It was in the mid 1990s.
Yeah, I remember that. I never felt one, but I remember the buzz about it. I was in that area. Yeah.
It was pretty wild, I've got to say, and I've never heard a really good explanation for it yet.
Another question, Peter. Why have we not seen another classified manned program be dislodged other than the bird of prey? Have we had anything else that's manned that was once secret during the Reagan administration or beyond declassified?
Yeah, we have not.
We have not.
Yeah, but that's not to say that they haven't been going on. So earlier I mentioned the designation X-273. Well, where did that come from? That was in an official Air Force biography of a test pilot. And as soon as that got attention on the internet, it kind of disappeared. But he described it as an X-plane, and little bits and pieces of information have leaked out since then. There was a project that involves scaled composites in Northrop. I assume Northrop, because Scaled Composites is their wholly owned subsidiary. They built a one-of-a-kind technology demonstrator to prove technologies for sixth-generation fighter planes. And it was only supposed to be used for a very brief, very specific set of test points.
Interesting.
And then that was going to be the end of it.
Wow.
And the initial test flights for airworthiness were done by the Scaled Composites test pilot, and then the Air Force guy did the flights for the test points. And when he got done, he went to the wing commander at Groom Lake and he said, "Hey, this is really amazing stuff. It's too good to just quit here. We need to continue." And the wing commander said, "Well, that's swell, but there is no way to continue the contract for a follow-on program.
Okay.
Sorry, we're done." Well, the pilot said, "We really need to do this. It's too important. We can't give up now." And he argued his case. And finally, the colonel said, "Look, if you can come up with a way to continue the contract, some contracting mechanism that will be legal and work, I will give you all the manpower and support you need." So he went out.
I want you to explain to everybody what Scale Composites is.
Yeah, it is a small company in Mojave, California that does rapid prototyping and development of exotic aircraft.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, he went out and he, by God, found a way to continue the program. He found a contracting mechanism. The contracting people backed him up on it. And so the program continued. The first flight of this aircraft had taken place in the summer of 2014, and the aircraft was still flying at least into the fall of 2016. I don't know how long it went beyond that.
Wow. Okay, I want to pop up this picture because I have a question about all of these badges, which all show, basically images of ETs. So I'm wondering, did you ever get any evidence that any of the technology that's coming out of Area 51 is at all related to the whole idea of UFO crash retrievals?
None whatsoever. I mean, the whole aliens, extraterrestrial, flying saucers, none of that ever came up in any of the research I did over the last more than 40 years. It was not part of the internal lore of Area 51. It wasn't anything that, when I say internal lore, I mean any organization and any facility that houses an organization will have some an oral history that gets passed down from generation to generation of people who work there on the different programs, and none of that ever came out. But that whole thing was kind of slabbed onto Area 51 in 1989, 1990 by Bob Lazar, and it became, since that was at the kind of the golden age of the internet coming online, that became the popular culture reference for Area 51. That's what everybody thinks about. Like if you go into any room full of people and say, hey, what do you know about Area 51? They're going to say UFOs, aliens, stuff like that. I was introduced to the topic before the internet existed, and so I never had any preconceived notions. I just went into it like a blank slate and picked up whatever I could pick up along the way. But because of Bob Lazar and in the mid 1990s, it really became the popular thing. There were a lot of TV shows, a lot of news programs. It basically went viral and brought tourists from all over the world to a remote part of the desert in Nevada to see what's going on out there.
Yeah, they called it the extraterrestrial highway. I mean, they renamed the highway.
Right. I mean, hey, I went out there myself. This caused the Air Force no end of problems, because as long as there were people with binoculars looking into the base, they couldn't bring their secret aircraft out onto the ramp. So workers would fly in and they'd sit around, twiddle their thumbs all day and not get any work done. It was costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. And finally, the Air Force started seizing parcels of public land to prevent people from getting close. And so the Air Force hated the whole UFO thing, but after a while, they adopted it as their own and kind of got in on the whole thing. And so that's why you see all these patches now with aliens and saucers and the whole works. So the patches I sent you in the pictures are examples of some of these. So you got a couple of them there. The ones at the top right and left. That was for the B-2.
Right.
So they would fly the B-2s out to Groom Lake, fly it through the range, testing the radar signature whenever they did modifications and maintenance and or changes they needed to verify. The Aerospace Integration Center patch on the top, that was based at Nellis, and it's part of an aviation and space integration of assets for military use. Pardon me. So the patch on the bottom left is pretty exciting looking, but it was just for a new type of piece of equipment, just some really basic equipment, an actuator program for the U-2. And then the other one on the right is B-2 survivability, signature control. Echo terrestrials as Echo Flight or E-Flight of one of the space squadrons in Colorado. And I sent you a couple different pictures of things from Air Force Plant 42 in Palmdale, which the commander who's out there kind of fancies Plant 42 as being, he likes to call it Area 52 because he completely ignores the fact that there's an actual Area 52 at Tonopah Test Range. But these are some of the patches that have come out of that.
Is that an official Plant 42 patch, Peter?
Well, it's official to the extent that these patches were made for the people who work there.
Really?
But it's not an official Air Force patch in the sense that that it went through any kind of heraldry approval or anything like that. So, you can get into the minutia of what's official and what's unofficial. This falls into the category I call official unofficial.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your stance on the whole UFO crash retrieval reporting? Are you skeptical of that?
Well, my big beef. I mean, we could have a whole show on this. If I ignore my biggest beef and just go to the secondary beef,
Okay.
people are talking about these crashes and saying, there have been X number of crashes. I personally would be skeptical that if an alien civilization had the technology to get here, that they would just show up and crash. And some people were saying, well, there's dozens of crashes, or there's more than 70 crashes. I gave a presentation at the 4th annual UFO Crash Retrieval Conference in Las Vegas, which is hosted by Ryan Wood. I'm sure you know him.
Sure.
And I know someone there was saying that there had been more than 70 UFO crash retrievals. So my first thing is, I don't think there would be that many. I'd be surprised if there was 1 or 2, but not 70. And if there were this many crash incidents, and you could, maybe it's not extraterrestrial, but maybe something crashed and was retrieved. If there is in fact an actual crash and the government shows up and they do the cleanup and stuff, you or I could go out to one of these crash sites and find stuff, like that D21 crash site that I went to. That's just one example. The presentation I gave at the conference was called After the Fire, How the Government Responds to Top Secret Crashes. And I've got quite a few case studies. I only used several of them in that presentation, but I've visited a lot of crash sites of aircraft, many of which were from Area 51, Tonopah Test Range, Edwards. A lot of these were advanced technology for their time, sensitive stuff, black projects at the time, which, because now stuff is declassified, you can go back and look at records and figure out what it really is. And you can visit the crash sites and find out what there is. Like the A-12, Project Oxcart, that started out as a black project. And nobody outside the program was supposed to be exposed to it. There were all kinds of security measures in place to prevent that. But it was a mock, it was a high Mach aircraft, so they had to fly it off range sometimes. In 1963, Ken Collins took one of the A-12s, the number 3 aircraft, took off from Area 51, flew out over Nevada and Utah for a test and training mission. Got into trouble. There was icing in the pitot tube. He had bad air data, and all of a sudden he found himself inverted in the clouds, and he had to bail out. Now, lucky for him, this was a low altitude mission, so he was just wearing a regular flight suit.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't gonna show up on the ground looking like a man from outer space. Plane crash 14 miles south of the town of Wendover on the Utah-Nevada state line. And some guys in a pickup truck on the nearby highway saw him coming down the parachute. So they went over there and picked him up. And he went to the local highway patrol, called Area 51. The response was immediate. They sent all kinds of people out to secure the site and clean it up. CIA headquarters said cleanup is top priority, superseding even the investigation. The pilot survived, so we'll just ask him what happened. And you guys need to clean up every trace of this thing.
Well, all right, let me ask you a direct question.
Sure.
And it's because I agree with you totally what you're saying so far, okay? Have you ever seen or heard of anything that you've been researching where they've used anti-grav technology anywhere?
I have not encountered that yet.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in Area 51. That's why I'm saying that.
Right. Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So anyway, they did this massive cleanup and they left. And the guy who was in charge of the operation sent a memo, a top secret memo to CIA headquarters saying explicitly, we cleaned up all traces of the aircraft. And this was before there was a Freedom of Information Act. So he had no expectation that anyone would ever see this except the people who were cleared. And I talked to some people who had been involved with the cleanup, and they said, oh, yeah, we got everything. You wouldn't find anything. So I went out and searched the desert. It's a big desert when you don't know exactly where to look. I started with a huge area and eventually whittled it down to 8 square miles, which is not insignificant. A single square mile is huge when you're having to walk it. I found other things. I found a World War II crash site of a P-47.
Wow.
But eventually I found the A-12 crash site, found pieces. Here's a piece of titanium skin from that
I
aircraft.
love it. That's cool. Yeah.
This was before the airplane was painted entirely black, so much of the
Yeah.
surface was natural metal,
Okay.
except for some parts that were light gray where they put the national insignia, stuff like that. I found pieces with A12 part numbers and Lockheed Skunk Works inspection stamps and things that I can now recognize from the aircraft that are on display in museums or from the technical data that's been declassified and whatnot. There was another A12 that crashed. This was in 1967, so by that time the SR-71 had been announced. And when this thing went down, they said it was an experimental model of the SR-71. Again, there was a huge cleanup effort, but as usual, you can go out and find pieces of the airplane at the crash site. And that's a relatively small piece. There were some guys who went out there a few years back who found some pretty big parts, because this was a plane that ran out of fuel about 70 miles short of Area 51 when it was on approach. The pilot had ejected from that, but unfortunately was not able to separate from his seat, and so he passed away.
So really quickly, Peter, the rumor out there is that the first 10 minutes of Top Gun Maverick is a documentary. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I would be surprised if that's true, although, there are some interesting things about that I don't remember what they called it in the movie, but that weird airplane that was supposed to be hypersonic. They brought that prop out to the Edwards Air Show and put it on display back in 2022. Apparently, some of the equipment in the cockpit is from an actual classified aircraft.
Interesting. Okay.
And like the control stick or maybe some panels or something, whatever they put in there, the guys who made the movie were told, this came from something. We can't tell you what it is, but it's in there.
And since you're the voice of reason here, Peter, and we have you here, have you run across any evidence whatsoever that there is a operating facility at Papoose Lake built into the side of a mountain?
Yeah, I never have. And of course, Bob Lazar talked about this thing. He said there was a hangar built into the side of a mountain adjacent to Papoose Lake. Now, if you actually look at Papoose Lake, there is no mountain that comes up to the shore of the lake bed. The nearest hill is a good distance away, and that landscape is all it's alluvial fans. I don't know if you know what that means. It's stuff that's washed down out of the mountains, rocks and sand and stuff like that.
Freezing up.
It would be a terrible, terrible thing to dig in if you want to put hangars in there.
Peter?
What's that? Did you lose me?
You're back.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, so I was saying it would be really terrible. It's really terrible geology for trying to dig in and build a hangar, and especially if you try to camouflage that, because you'd probably leave a pretty big scar. So I've never seen any evidence that anything is a groom like that. That guy who took the low altitude pictures when he flew through the range a few years back, he flew over Papoose Lake and took some pictures. Didn't see anything there of interest. Everybody I've talked to who worked at the facility says, no, we didn't have anything out there. The closest stuff is some radar sites, and you can see those in the satellite pictures.
So is there anything out there designated as 4?
It's Site 4, which is actually up on Tonopah Test Range. It's not near Papoose Lake. If you go further north to Tonopah Test Range, is the Site 4 complex, which is full of radars and threat systems. And I talk about that in the book too. It's grown quite a lot over the years. It's a really impressive part of the instrumented ranges. It's possible Lazar got the name S4 from Site 4.
If there was a facility at Papoose Lake, wouldn't the F-117 test pilots who were flying all around that area prior to 88, wouldn't they have seen something?
Well, you'd think so.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who flies around there, and it's visible from a lot of places, depending if you're flying outside the restricted airspace, or if you get clearance to fly through, like that one guy did, then you can get a really good view of it. There was that man Freeman who hiked in there. He was looking for the Death Valley 49ers carving in one of the rocks. He got pretty close to Papoose Lake. There's a picture of him actually with Papoose in the background, and I don't think he ever saw anything particularly there.
Yeah, well, if there really was UFO hardware down there, people are probably not going to talk about it. But there are a number of researchers who've certainly talked to people in Area 51 insiders, they claim, that have talked about there being crashed UFOs. I fall on the side of believing a number of these reports because there's quite a few of them, certainly not only at Area 51, but I do understand having to, the thing that bothers me about the UFO crash retrieval reports is they're purely anecdotal. We have nothing to verify it. But there's enough of them. They're coming from, like Ben Rich, he talked about it. He certainly seems to be in a position where he would know something.
Possibly. I do know that one of his coworkers, I asked him about something that Ben Rich had said, and he responded by saying, Ben tended to fire for effect rather than accuracy. So I don't know. I'm not really in a position to know. I met Ben Rich. I did not get a chance to really get to know him, so I can't really say. I've seen his original manuscript, the unpublished version, which had a couple chapters he didn't include because he was told not to. One of which had to do with the Glomar Explorer, and the other was the Senior Prom cruise missile prototype. I felt bad that Ben didn't get to include Senior Prom in his book, so I have a very juicy section on that project in my book, which I'm quite proud of, and I owe a lot to Ben for that, for his material.
Very cool.
Peter, what are your comments on David Grush's testimony 2 years ago in open congressional hearings when he talked about an ongoing UAP crash retrieval program?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of him. So many of these stories, there's so much so much noise and not enough signal. Again, it's like you say, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff. I want to see the proof. I want to see proof.
I think David Grush, no offense to him, is full of it. You know what I'm saying? I think they were told to say what he said.
Right.
In my estimation, and from what I've grown up and understood about how this all works, a whistleblower who comes out was sanctioned to do it and told what to say. And then he was put on the outside knowing full well what was about to happen to him when he did. I do not believe a word of it. It is misinformation and disinformation, 100%. There is something going on. You all have no clue what that is, and you're not going to. And I think this is a smoke and mirror show. That's what I think.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope we get to the truth one day, but I don't think our governments are going to tell it willingly.
Preston, what are your thoughts on Donald Trump's latest tweet from Thursday of last week?
It's unprecedented.
About declassifying.
Yes.
Hopefully that's the tweet you're talking about. There are so many horrible tweets that come out there. But if you mean the declassification, I mean, I hope so. I'll
put words in his mouth. He didn't say any of that. He said, and I quote, "I'm going to initiate an investigation via the CIA and the DOJ." That's all he said. He said nothing else. I will report after. That's what he said. And everybody has just taken it and flown crazy with it.
Right.
Nobody's going to say anything. That's the
problem. I will wait and see. I'm prepared to be unimpressed, but I'll wait and see what comes out.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is interesting about it is no president has really done that before. So that's interesting.
The only reason he did it is because Obama opened his mouth and said what he said. Between the two of them, that's it. Okay.
Peter, if you had to take a guess, what other birds do you think are still lurking out there that are manned, maybe during the Reagan administration, that have not been dislodged?
That's a good question. One of the stories that came out, there was a pilot named Frank Burke. I mentioned him in the book. Mm-hmm. He, according to some of his his material, he said he flew a classified advanced technology demonstrator in the summer of 1983. And he made several flights in it. I've never found out what it was called. I don't know what he did with it. I asked another person who was out there at the time, who had been in control of, budgeting and stuff. He was on base, and he said, "Yeah, I would have known about this, but I don't remember anything like that." And I don't know whether that's just because so many years have passed, and he didn't remember, and it was a small project or what. But there was something from, let's say, the early 90s. I think some guy sent me a patch with a lightning bug design, and he said this is a Northrop project that took place. But recently somebody connected that same emblem to scaled composites. I don't know if that was before or after Northrop bought them.
Okay.
And there may have been a connection between the two since they were doing work together. Obviously, stealth helicopters have been a big thing out there for a long time. And like the one that was used during the Pakistan raid to get Osama bin Laden. That was a Boeing. That was a Boeing Phantom Works project to develop a stealthy helicopter. It seems to be based on the HH-60 type, but with a kit to make it, less visible to radar and maybe quieter. So there's a lot of things, and we usually only get hints because there are program patches from these different things, and you just look at the weird patches and try to figure out what's going on. And
I have a question for you. Are there other air bases in this country who are running programs that are related to the ones out where you are?
Well, you see, the detachment of the Air Force Test Center that runs Groom Lake also runs the Tonopah Test Range Airfield. And they run the areas, I think they run the Area 6, Yucca Flat Airfield, which is mostly used for UAVs, as far as I can tell. And they've also got the Base Camp Airfield, which is off-site. That's been used for some special operations stuff. And even though it's right next to a highway, which seems like a problem.
So it's all localized out west. You don't know of any other bases in this country that are related to that in any way?
There may be more, but I'm not familiar with them.
Okay.
Some people suggested there could be something in Alaska. I don't know. I've never looked into that, but it's possible. That's
well, I got ideas. I got two bases that I would mention, but I'm not going to because I might get you in trouble. I also know that there are places where they build components in the states where these bases are. Okay, and it's not in out west.
Okay.
Okay, and it's spread out pretty good. It's also it's global. There are other places that they use in other countries as well. It's a pretty big deal, and it's a massive undertaking. And a lot of this stuff, and I'm just going to say this, I think that a lot of the information we get about other countries and their aircraft is deliberately shared. And okay, I think that we got MiGs because we were meant to get MiGs. I think that China played a part in that. I think that we've given China stuff through other countries as well. I think that we let China come over our country and look at where our bases are. There's a lot of global misadventuring going on, and it just gives you an idea of what are you people doing?
What's really staggering is the amount of money that's being put into this. I mean, the billions and trillions of dollars in the black budget. And
well, we aren't responsible for all of it. America couldn't possibly have funded all this. It's coming from other places as well. See what I'm saying? And it's people, I mean, those who can do math should sit down and really think this one through,
Peter, when the government records these test flights of these classified aircraft, where do they keep the motion picture film reels, the 8x10 black and white glossy photos, the gun camera? Where do they keep that? Is it within private defense contractors, or is it at a separate government warehouse?
I expect if the government has paid for it, it's probably in government vaults. And there's probably a lot of different ones. To mention one thing, they eventually some of these programs get declassified, like Constant Peg, the MiGs up at Tonopah Test Range. Now, when those were declassified, and I'm trying to remember when that was. I want to say it was around 2006, maybe, something like that. They released some pictures and some motion picture footage as well, but not as much as they originally had in storage. There were a lot of records and photographs and films and whatnot that were in a vault in the Pentagon.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, on September 11th, 2001, somebody put an airplane through that vault, so that was lost, which is a real shame. You wonder what else was in that vault that might have been interesting.
You mean it wasn't underground?
No,
Why?
didn't need to be. It was in a secure safe.
That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Because I know that they've got plenty of underground under the Pentagon. They have them under Dulles Airport and other places, and I can prove that. It makes no sense to me why they had that particular information in a vault where it could be vulnerable to something, like an airport.
Well, they probably didn't think it was vulnerable. I mean, when I was working,
Yeah.
when I was working in supporting Air Force flight test evaluation,
Yeah.
the definition of vault varied from squadron to squadron. Like the B-2 guys, they had a vault that looked like, well, it looked like a vault. It looked like a bank vault. I mean, the big, thick steel doors, the wheel
Bomb
that turns, and the whole works. And other vaults, one of them was practically, a storage room that had been converted for using, you had a safe in there and a nice comfy couch and record player and pretty impressive collection of vinyl to listen to while we were working. But it wasn't a secure facility in the way that you typically
shoot,
would
you know
think
what?
of it.
We're out of time.
Okay.
Oh no! Oh my God!
I completely lost track of time there. We have to shut it up really quick now.
Time flies when you're having fun.
You
so
want to come
sorry.
back? Can we get you to come back like in a couple of months? And we can.
Oh yeah, I'm
stop?
sure we can
Both
do
of
that
you?
sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to close it up real quick. I'm sorry, guys.
Thanks, Peter,
That was
for
amazing.
joining us. Thank you.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael, for suggesting that he come on. This has
Yep.
been more than interesting. I mean, it's wow. All right.
Peter knows this story. He does.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We are coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Roku, and we are on Rumble. Y'all have a great week. Be safe. Be happy.
Sorry we had to cut you off.
Yeah, we'll do this again, I promise. Okay. Night, night.